We know very well that God can raise an individual. God can select or can elect a person from among a group. When God raises a person to be a leader, at times, same God can reject that person if he or she doesn't work as per God's will. When you read the book of 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1, we find out that God rejected Saul and he decided to rise David. And Samuel, who was the one who anointed Saul, was mourning, was not ready to let it go. But it really says he should have let it go and decided to do what God had wanted, to go and anoint David. At times, God rejects his people who he had chosen to take certain positions in leadership. For example, if God had elected a certain person to be a president or to be a leader for his revival to take place, when such a leader refuses to do God's will, automatically God will reject such a person. If God wants to reject to anoint an individual, maybe that person to be promoted from a junior staff to a supervisor and to a manager, the reason which God decided these people to be elevated is because he wanted his people to get justice. But when such people refuse to give justice, even if God wanted them to be elevated further, they can be demoted. Even in marriages, God can make his own way so that a certain person marries a certain individual, not because of their own things or because they wanted to, but it's because God wanted to sort certain issues from one family or from both families. One person can be transferred from one unit to another, or can decide to work from to a different country, not because they themselves wanted, but it's because God wanted those people to learn something. So when such a person goes to that country and decided to do his or her own things against God's will, God will reject an individual. God can decide to elevate a person, maybe he's a street boy, to be a very popular musician. And the reason why God wanted to raise such a person is because he wanted such an individual, such a popular musician, to raise the street children, to ensure the street children are sorted out. But when such a person becomes popular and forgets where he came from, forgets to help the street children, God can decide to reject such an individual. So at times it's not about us. At times it's not about who God has risen. It is because of God's people around such an individual. Even when God gives you money or gives an individual money, at times not all money belongs to such an individual. At times it is channel God uses to give such an individual, then such an individual gives others or helps others. So when God decides to reject an individual whom he had elevated, whom he has selected, then it's not our will to reject God's will. When he said to change, let us change with him. Let us not mourn. Let us ensure we do God's will